Let's be honest, parenting can be messy and hard, but also so rewarding. In this podcast, we'll share all the ups and downs of parenthood, as well as share some of our favorite tips and tricks for parenting using both our experiences and expertise from our professional lives as a speech and language pathologist and teacher, but also our everyday lives as moms, just trying to balance it all. We're so glad you could join us.
Hello, welcome to And Then We Had Kids. I'm Jenny.
And I'm Sheena.
And I know I say it every time, but I love when we have guests on here. And I think that this is such a beautiful way to start off year 3 of what we got going on, Sheena. And I know you've known this person, you've worked with this organization that we get to talk about. And it's something that I know all of our listeners in some form or fashion have had to experience this, but it's definitely not an easy piece to talk about. But Sheena, I will let you introduce our guests that we have on for today's episode.
Sure. So I met our guest a couple years ago now. I think it's been like 3 years. So for those that don't know, many of you know, I have the BRCA2 mutation. And so I have done a lot of just volunteer work within the cancer community. I'm also the daughter of a breast cancer survivor. My mom was, I think she was 34 when she got diagnosed. And so I was only about 8 years old at the time. And I just remember really relying on our network to support our family during that process. So as I kind of got involved with the cancer community as an adult, learning about kind of the provider community, being high risk for breast and ovarian cancer, I did a lot of work with a different organization in Chicago, but that founder had shared a new organization in Chicago that was supporting kids who were navigating their parents' cancer journey. And that just really struck home with me, just given my experience as a kid. So I reached out and actually was connected with our guest, Kelsey Mora, who is the Chief Clinical Officer of Pickles. So I'm going to let her talk a little bit more about Pickles, but I'm also really excited because Kelsey just recently came out with a book. So she's also adding author to her many lists of amazing talents. So Kelsey Mora, thank you for joining us. And I'll let you kind of share a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dive into all of the great work that you're doing.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. So as you shared, my name is Kelsey Mora, and I am a dual certified child life specialist and therapist. So my story is that I actually had a friend with leukemia when I was a teenager, and I visited him in the hospital, and he actually died while I was visiting him. And it was a really intense experience as a young teenager. I was 16 years old. I just got my driver's license, and I started volunteering where he was treated, and I learned about child life. So it immediately became my dream job. So 16 years old, pursued the field of child life, studied it, in undergrad, and worked in the pediatric hospital for almost a decade, where I was really supporting kids, either who were the patient or who were a sibling, or we would get called to children of adult patients. And where things twisted for me is when I started working in private practice as well. And I had families who had parents, kids who had parents with cancer, and they were wanting more support. And a few families said, like, we want you to meet our families together. And so I started doing these informal support groups through my private practice. And those families started Pickles Group. So it's 3 founding families in the North Shore. And they started Pickles Group, which is now a national, quite literally a global nonprofit organization that supports the children of cancer patients. So they hired an executive director, Cassie Horton, who's amazing. And she came back around and connected with me, and we made it a formal position for me. And I left the hospital and took on this role at Pickles Group. And so now I work in private practice still, but then am really involved in making Pickles Group grow and reach more kids who are in this situation.
That's awesome. So can we back up? I had never heard of child life specialist until a few years ago, because my oldest son has some medical issues where he has to get MRIs pretty regularly, and he was assigned a child life specialist during both of those procedures. But I had never heard of it. Jenny, I don't know if you have.
No, not in all the experiences of like the things that we've gone through. I mean, I've got 3 kids, and you kind of like think you know everything that's out there, and it's kind of
Right.
to hear that you don't, that there's also like there's more options. So yeah, I'd love to hear more about what exactly that is. It sounds helpful.
Yeah, so it's usually a good thing if you don't know what a child life specialist is, only because it means, you know, that your child may be facing a medical event. So it could really be anything from an outpatient procedure to a hospitalization, to an emergency room visit. And so child life specialists are often working in pediatrics, helping kids and families cope with medical experiences. So I might be guiding parents on how to talk to their kid about something. I might be talking to the kid themselves about what's going to happen during a procedure and how to be calm and still and distracted during that procedure. We are in the trauma bay during an emergency room trauma at the head of the bed, like talking to a child all the way to end of life care. I used to work in the pediatric ICU, so I would make keepsakes and mementos at the bedside when a child or a parent was dying. And so it really runs the span of more like acute medical events to more traumatic critical illness and end of life. And the niche of like also being able to just help children impacted by any medical experience. So that's where the pickles piece is children of adult patients, because child life specialists just have this unique understanding about the diagnoses and the treatment and the procedures and the tests and the medical equipment that kids are going to be faced with. So that's what a child life specialist is. But we also have, in the last several years, child life has really expanded into the community. So working in private practice, in nonprofit organizations, and other types of settings. So we're just uniquely positioned to help kids facing these types of traumatic experiences.
That's so interesting. So I volunteer with Pickles. It's how I met Kelsey. But Kelsey, if you could share a little bit more about Pickles. I know you said that it was started by some families within the North Shore. I love the story of how the name came about. So if you wouldn't mind kind of digging into a little bit of that, that'd be great.
Yeah. So Pickles was named by the kids themselves. It's not a very intuitive name. So, you know, of course, it helps to share what we do, but we really provide free support and resources to kids and teens impacted by their parents' cancer. And that is done in a lot of different ways. So one of my primary roles is educating parents and caregivers and healthcare providers on how to talk to kids about cancer. I do a lot of webinars and trainings and on-demand content for parents through Pickles Group. And then our youth programming is bringing kids together. So our tagline is kids supporting kids. So we're really creating these groups of kids that are building a community where they just get it with each other. And we have a 5-week curriculum that I designed that is offered virtually. So that's where we have kids. I think we have like over 50 kids enrolled in our winter program for 2024. And so kids all over the map are getting into age-based groups and going through this curriculum where they build relationships, learn about cancer, talk about their feelings, gain coping skills, talk about hope and gratitude. So it's really intentional and purposeful, but it's delivered in a play-based format. So it's child life informed, but it is not like group therapy or a support group because it's really delivered by trained volunteers like Sheena and others. A lot of our volunteers are grad students or professionals who are wanting to get involved in this community. And then we're going to be launching new programming in 2024 where we really help these kids build more intimate, longer lasting relationships. So we want them to be in closed cohorts for longer periods of time where they really get to know each other and have kind of, I had a teen once tell me that she just wanted a Pickles friend in her back pocket. And I really feel like that's what we're building is like them being able to just access each other whenever they need each other. So that's what Pickles does.
Yeah. And I think, it was definitely something I wish had been around when I was a kid going through it, which I think was one of the many reasons I was just so drawn to the organization and learning more about it and volunteering. Because I think it can be a really isolating experience as a kid when you also don't understand all of the ins and outs that are happening within your home. And it's interesting, even with siblings, my sister and I have really reflected on our experience when our mom was going through cancer, and we have very different experiences. And I think partly that was due to our age difference. So I was the older sibling. I was a little bit more aware of everything going on, where my sister was younger and, naive, and I think often protected from a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that my mom and our family as a whole was navigating. So I just think it's amazing work that you guys are doing with Pickles.
Yeah, you bring up a good point about ages. Our youth programming is really designed for 1st through 12th grade, but the trainings that I do are really applicable for parents, parenting all ages. So I do talk about infancy and toddlers and preschoolers and how to navigate talking about cancer with different age groups. And a lot of the tips that I share are really transferable to everyday life, right? It's about being,
Yeah.
having honest conversations, anticipating changes, validating feelings. So definitely it's very transferable just to parenting in general. But yeah, I just wanted to mention the age thing because I think that's so valid in terms of just what age these kiddos are when the diagnosis is started, and then kind of how they navigate as they grow and develop.
Yeah.
Especially from like a parent piece too, of like not knowing how to have these conversations, but knowing that they're incredibly important to have. And maybe you wouldn't even think about having it when you have a little one, like a baby, but it's so incredible that you guys even think about that young. So yeah, I feel fortunate that it hasn't touched me that way, but I mean, it could at any point. And so to have like a resource like this, because did you, and apologize, my dog was distracting me for a hot minute, but is most of your grouping done virtually? Or is there an in-person component? I just don't know if I missed that piece.
Yeah, no, I actually did not mention that. So I'm glad you asked. So we started in Chicago's North Shore, and so we have a big community here. And so we're really seeing the most growth virtually. I think part of it is just the way that kids and teens interact these days. I think it's very
Yeah.
much like meeting them in their generational, needs, but also just geographically being able to broaden our reach. But that being said, we will continue to have in-person programming. And so we're going to kind of have like 4 really main events. We usually do like a kids day out. We do a big summer event. We do an honor event every November where we're really honoring the parents. And there's a grief component to that event as well for kids who have lost parents. And so we're hoping as we grow and we find we start to have larger communities in different cities that we'll be able to then offer those events in different cities across the map. So we already have a lot of interest from another city that was closely connected to one of our founding families. And so I think we'll be able to start offering some of those bigger events in different cities, which is awesome.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So one of the resources that we talk about with Pickles, and just I think stuff that you do with even maybe your private practice, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is what kind of led you to your new book. Is that right?
Yeah, I haven't talked about it yet. Yeah, so the dot method, it's interesting. It is my way. It's always been my way of teaching kids about cancer, and I didn't really realize that it was so unique and special and impactful until I basically had an oncologist at a pediatric center asking like, what is that? Like, I want to know what that is. I was
Yeah.
using it with a 2-year-old patient. That was like that we were sharing that patient. And it was 2020. So like crazy year. I mean, I was pregnant with my first child, pandemic, all the things. And I was like, this needs to be something. So I turned it into a workbook at that time. And so that was like pre-Pickles. And I wasn't able to like connect with a publisher and editor just because of like the situation in 2020.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I like had my kids, I switched to, Pickles and incorporated the dot method into Pickles Group. So it is copyrighted and owned by me, but it's something we use in Pickles Group. So the kids do the dot method in a group format. It's basically like learning about healthy cells and then learning about cancer cells and then learning about how treatment works, which basically X's out the dots of healthy and sick cells, which is what causes side effects. So it takes kids through learning about healthy cells, sick cells, or cancer cells, and then treatment and side effects. So I finally reconnected with an editor in 2023. And the dot method was just published at the beginning of this year. It's available for purchase on Amazon now. It's in a workbook format. And so pages 1 through 12 are really that education piece of what are cancer cells, what is treatment. And then there's also the second half of the book is really about feelings and coping. There's a page on how do you handle a good day? How do you handle a difficult day? There's a page that talks about how the goal of treatment is to get rid of as many cancer cells as possible. And sometimes that's not possible. So there's an element of, the workbook being able to make sense for different outcomes and types of cancers. And what I'm most excited about is that it's interactive. So the artist of the book is basically the kid. Every page they can draw or write something. And so by the end, they've got this cover to cover keepsake that is their cancer story. It might be the kid who has cancer. It might be the sibling. It might be parent, grandparent. So it's like an everybody book.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's
Congratulations. First, that's incredible. And what an area of need to be able to have something that feels sometimes so abstract to then make it concrete for these little kids to understand, or even teenagers to understand, or even young adults. It's something that can just feel so overwhelming, I'm sure, and not knowing where to start with these conversations, so then have a guided book that leads you through it. I was looking at it, I was like, oh, this looks incredible.
Yeah, and I like that it really is applicable for any age, any type of learner. It's that interactive, which we know is really beneficial for kids as a way to learn. So I'm excited that this book is out finally. I'm excited for you. So yeah.
Yeah, it's super. I mean, just yesterday, the American Cancer Society released their 2024 data around cancer. And I mean, we just know that the prevalence is so high and the age of those getting diagnosed is so much younger. And so in some ways, I feel like it's it wasn't meant to be published until 2024 because I just feel like it just comes at a good time for me to reach, as many families, just because we know that families are being impacted in so many ways. And there's a guide at the front of the book. I'm sure, Sheena, you would appreciate this with your, being your neurodiversity mindset of being an educator, but it's how to use this book. So, it talks about how to modify for different age groups. And there's even a way to use it without drawing and using tactile, pom-poms as your dots. So, one of my reviewers called it an everybody book. And I think that's right. I know it's about cancer, but unfortunately, I think it really is an everybody book. And and I mean, I'm not shy. My son has read every grief book that exists just because that's my job. So I'm not afraid of these concepts, but hope that nobody will be.
Yeah. Well, and part of why I wanted to kind of, I think I had just reached out to Kelsey maybe last week about this, and we quickly got this scheduled because January is actually Children Impacted by Parents Cancer Month. So I think it's also just great timing to talk and bring awareness to Pickles and the dot method and the work that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is Kesem started that month, and we're part of what's the word I'm looking for? An alliance of all the amazing organizations that are kind of focused in this area. And so collectively, I think all the orgs have been able to really highlight this unique area of impact and showcase some of the different ways that we're supporting families in this area. Because I think it's not something that everybody remembers or thinks about that exists.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So I know Sheena volunteers generously her time her energy and kindness and all that, how can other people get involved with Pickles, whether it's here in the North Shore area or, like you said, you kind of hitting a lot of all over the world kind of spots. So how can people get involved?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways. I mean, I think awareness is huge, right? So following
Mhm.
all of our social media accounts, sharing about it, telling people that that pickles is a thing. We're new. Sheena's been with us from the very beginning, and we're so grateful for her dedication. But we're going on just our third year, and we've experienced actually like a ton of growth in this last year. I think we've tripled our reach in 1 year, and so awareness is huge. Of course, like time, people volunteering. There's a lot of different ways to get involved, whether it's directly with the youth or helping us build awareness at a conference booth or a 5K booth, or we're going to have more kind of event planning type roles with the pivot that we're making with these like really big signature events. And then of course, like if someone doesn't have the time to give, or maybe that's not how they want to give, of course, donating to the organization is always another way to support. Every little bit helps, and everything we do for kids and families is completely free. So that really helps us reach more families as well.
One of the things too that I don't think we talked about is just the cancer kits that you guys send out to families. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a great, I was actually going to add, I think awareness can also come in the form of like telling healthcare providers too. So if anyone is like getting screened or is a cancer patient themselves, like sharing about Pickles Group with healthcare providers, that's like really our primary source of referrals and awareness. And so building awareness within the healthcare organizations is helpful. And that is our family support kit. So we designed a family support kit that basically is how to talk to kids about cancer, and it's in a print or a PDF format. And a lot of healthcare providers are giving it out at the bedside to families. So it can be requested on our website, again, completely free. We mail it to clinics, hospitals, schools, families themselves who are requesting it. And the webinar that I do is kind of a deeper dive into that support kit. I'm going to be updating it in 2024, and we're also planning to have it available in Spanish. So that will be really exciting. And yeah, that's a really valuable resource that we have. And it can be easily requested.
Nice. That's great. So you alluded to little ones at home. So you're also a mom of little ones. So talk to us a little bit about just kind of your parenthood journey. How do you navigate being a private provider and helping to run, the Pickles Group and coming up with the dot method? And you wear a lot of
Yeah.
hats and you're balancing a lot of spinning plates. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I don't know. I don't know how it gets done, but it doesn't all get done. That's the
Yeah,
reality.
right. There we go.
Yeah, the kitchen sink probably has a ton of dishes in it right now. But no, I have a 3.5-year-old son and a 15-month-old daughter. So I'm in the thick of the little ones. And my son was born in August of 2020. So it was in March, I was like just entering my second trimester, I think, when the world shut down. And I worked in the pediatric ICU through my pregnancy during the pandemic. It was a lot. Becoming a new parent was isolating. Like we were following guidelines in terms of distancing. And so, I mean, it's kind of a whirlwind to think about it. In some ways, I feel like it allowed us to have so much like quality time together, right? And like have less distractions. But my whole world changed, and sometimes I'm not clear if it's because I became a parent or if it's because of the pandemic or both, or like it's just
Right, all of
all
it.
of the above.
yeah. But I went to part-time at the hospital after my son was born. I had been in private practice the whole time, but I went down to a couple days a week and worked in pre-surgery, and so I was doing like I was with my son a couple days a week, and then had my mother-in-law watching him the other days. I've always just like pieced together this like non-traditional work schedule. And so then when I took on the role of Pickles Group, it really just took the place of my hospital hours. So I see clients at night. My husband and I literally like swap out at 5:30 p.m. every night. We have like a half an hour of dinner. He does like the cleanup and bedtime. I'm with clients, but then I'm with my kids a lot during the day. So it's crazy, but I like feel like I have the best of both worlds, that I get to be with them more than I would if I was working a traditional schedule. But then I also work a lot, and I'm so passionate about what I do that it's really fulfilling in all the ways. And like my son is so cute. Like he like saw my picture like in the book, and he's like, "Mama," like he like gives me a hug. He's like, that's you, that's your book." And I'll be like, he just is so excited about it. I feel like he really like gets it. He's
You
always been
understand?
a very
It's
like,
a big deal. Yeah.
yeah, it's like my mom is like in this book, like I'm like, yeah, like that's my picture. It's kind of crazy, but yeah, it's I don't know. It's really cool to be able to like be with them and work in a field that I love so much. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. That, and for something that, I mean, bless your heart. I mean, like truly, like of what you're doing is like just incredible. And like thinking about it, I get like teary eyed at times of just like imagining now at different stages of my life. Like as a parent, it shifts and it hits differently. How do you, or maybe you don't, and maybe this is just your incredible skill set. Do you have to find ways to like compartmentalize and you have that half hour, it doesn't feel like enough time to like shift, from being with your kid and then talking about some really heavy hearted pieces. It, again, it might just be you're just really incredible at what you do, or is there something that you're able to do to shift?
Yeah, it's such a good question, and it's such an important one. I think I've always really thought of self-care not as like a thing I do, but more of something I allow myself to balance, right? And so I think for me, it's boundaries. Like it's always been boundaries. And so my motto, I have two mottos. One is trust that you're where you're needed most. And so like wherever I'm at in that moment is like who needs me, or where I'm needed, or how I can add value. And that was true. Like when I worked in the pediatric ICU, like I could have 15 patients and I might have spent the whole day with one of them. And I could leave feeling really guilty about where I wasn't, but I had to trust that I was where I was needed in that moment. And so, and that might be with my own kids sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And so
Mhm.
that's like one thing. And then the other thing is that I really focus on making like better memories out of difficult moments. Like I'm not in control of these horrible things that are happening, right? But I can hopefully help like make it a little bit of a better memory for families, or help with support. And I've seen really hard things, but I've also seen really beautiful things happening like amidst the hard, right? Like families coming together, like kids like learning and growing and connecting in a way that might not have happened otherwise. And so those are kind of my two mottos. I feel like it's more of a mindset for me than like something that I do.
Yeah.
But I do take a dance class every Wednesday night, and that's like my thing.
Nice.
Well, yeah, that is, but that is an incredible like reframe. I think even as parents to think about like I'm needed where I'm needed most, like that. I mean, that just really resonated. Um, that applies to like us as moms, as parents in general. And then add on top of it, we're going to have these hard conversations and talking about cancer. Wow. So that was helpful, really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And my private caseload is like not only cancer. I think it's a variety of things. I work a lot. I mean, I guess it is all hard stuff because that's kind of why people see me. But I work with a lot of like medical experiences. I work with grief, I work with food allergies, autoimmune disorders like gastrointestinal diseases, and chronic illness. So there's like a little bit of variety there too.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Nice.
Very cool. So where can people, if they're interested in learning more about just what you do or about pickles, where can they find out more about you, your book, and pickles?
Yeah, so the dot method is available on Amazon. And I also offer discounted like bulk orders. So if it's a hospital or a clinic that's going to be giving it out more frequently or using it more frequently, there's an option for that. So my website is childlifetherapist.com, and I also have an Instagram, Child Life Therapist. So that is where to find about the book and my own work. I put out a lot of tips just about the context of illness and grief in general and parenting. And then Pickles Group is picklesgroup.org. We're on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I don't know if I'm forgetting anything, but we're on all the main social media channels. And it's a great, like, going to our website, you know, that's where we share about all the webinars that I'm doing and our youth programming. We have a referral form for hospitals or anyone who wants to refer a family. Families can self-enroll. So everything's on the website. So yeah.
Wow.
We'll be sure to link all of that in the show notes so that everyone has those resources available at the tips of their fingers.
Awesome. And I'll add, I mean, Pickles Group on our website, we keep a list of resources in general for cancer, both national, local, books, end of life, grief, and the DOT method is one of those resources, but there's a whole lot of resources and books, so families can kind of self-select what matches their need as well.
Wow.
Great. Well, thank you, Kelsey, so much for joining us. And thank you for all of the amazing work that you're doing with families.
Thank you. And thank you to you for being one of our superstar volunteers and inviting me on here to share a little bit more.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all of the latest, you can follow us on Instagram @_andthenwehadkids. Thanks again, and like we say, life used to be carefree, and then we had kids.